Okay, I've been asked to show how I remove the scratches. There's a couple minor scratches on this Colt Magnum Carry I just got, and a lot of people are very interested in what I do to remove those. Since the scratches are in two different places here, two different types of scratches, there's the ones right there. You can see that roughness right there around that edge. That's a rounded edge and a flat edge. So I'm going to do two different ways there. This up here, this little nick on the is on a flat edge. So there have to be different ways of dealing with both of those scratches. For the flat edges, I need two things, or three things. I need a flat piece of wood. This is a little piece of molding that I'm using here. I'll need some gun oil, or any type of oil, 3-in-1 oil, whatever. And I'll need a piece of 320 grit wet dry sandpaper. Okay, the first thing I need to do to the wet dry sandpaper here is I need to wrap it around the piece of wood for the flat piece. Then I'll soak it down pretty good with the oil. Get the oil on it good there. And then, since that scratch is right on the side of that, I lay the flat edge right along that edge and I just rub. Very lightly, very slowly, just rub. Okay, after just a few seconds of rubbing, you can see that the burr has started to disappear from the side. So then I have to start doing the same thing along the top. And I apologize for the poor lighting in this video. I couldn't light my video properly and still get to the gun, so in the way I need to. So I just alternate rubbing top, rubbing side, just slowly, gently, rubbing top, rubbing side, just to make sure to keep my sharp edge. I don't want to rub along the edge like this. Never rub on the edge, you'll lose your sharp edge. Just keep rubbing top, then side. And make sure to go in the grain of the steel to keep the pattern right in the brushing. About 30 seconds of rubbing and the scratch is gone. Now I can also now take a dry piece of the sandpaper and just very lightly rub to give the brush texture back. And that'll bring the brush texture back to the steel. Or I can go take my bead blaster and give it a nice bead blast all across the top, which is what I'll do when I finish the gun. But that shows you there, that nick is gone. So let's move on to the one on the curved area. Remember, on the flat areas, never use your fingers because your fingers will shape and round things off. Always use a piece of wood, something flat. Wood is great. It's not too hard, and yet it's hard enough to keep the surface. So never use your fingers when sanding a flat surface like that or a sharp edge surface. This part is going to be different because it is on a rounded edge. On a rounded edge, you can use your fingers. You can just simply put your hand there and start rubbing along that edge. Make sure the paper has some oil on it. You don't want to rough up the surface too bad. That keeps you from roughing up the surface too bad or damaging or gouging the surface. And you just keep rubbing like this, checking occasionally to see what you need to do and what you don't. Now this does have a flat section too, so on the flat section I would take the paper, put it on the steel, and rub it back and forth. Just like that on the flat side. So let me work on that for a second here. While I'm in progress here, one thing I want to do, remind you to say specifically, do not use the flat edge on surfaces like this. Just like you don't want to use your fingers on a flat or a sharp edge because you'll lose the sharpness and the flatness. You'll end up with valleys and hills. You don't want to use a flat surface on a rounded edge. If you use a flat surface on a rounded edge, you'll end up with flat spots that show up really badly. Believe me, they'll show up bad and they'll be nearly impossible to get rid of. So remember to use your fingers for this. That way you can feel around the edge. Your fingers give to the shape of the edge. Make sure to use fingers on the rounded surfaces or you will just destroy them. Okay, those marks now are gone to my satisfaction. You can see there, they're gone. Now one thing I did do on this, I intentionally didn't mask this off. But you should always tape the areas around where you're working. I didn't do it intentionally here, just so I could show you where the rubbing of the paper marred the main surface. Now I could brush that back out, just take the grips off and brush that back out. I intend to polish this gun up, so that's not a big issue for me right here, because I'm just going to polish that out, buff that out. But if you were going to not buff out the gun, if you're going to leave it the natural brushed, you would want to tape all around the area where you're working so that the edges of your paper aren't scratching your surface like that. Because believe me, you can make yourself more work than what you started out with if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. But as you can see, those scratches there are gone. And the ones on the up here are gone. So that was all the damage to this gun. There's not a lot of sharp edges, not a lot of deburring to do on this one. There might be a little I'll go through and maybe take off a few little sharp edges, but it'll be the same process you just saw. So that's pretty much how you remove the scratches and imperfections from a gun like this, a stainless gun. Now if you were doing this on a blued gun, if you had a blued gun that had damage, you would have to remove the finish, do that, and then have it refinished. Which I would not recommend on older guns or guns that have a collector's value, because it's better to have a nick or a scratch with an original finish than it is to have a perfect new finish. But on stainless guns, you can do all the work you want with them. No one will ever be able to tell they were ever worked on because it's still the original stainless. But that's pretty much how I do what I do to the scratches and the nicks. Two more things I want to show you here, small things. I did mar one of the screws a little bit taking it out, so I will have to fix that. Another thing, the cylinder release has some really rough finishing in there. The person who buffed that did a crappy job. So I will want to fix that as well. The screw head is easy. Just take it and take a piece of wetted paper and just rub it right across, going right along with the slot. You can see I've got a nice good screw again. That took off any marring along the screw slot there. Real easy to do, takes a couple seconds. Okay, in the case of this concave surface like this, what I need to do is I need to find something that fits in that surface. This little pin worked out perfectly, so what I do is I take that, I wrap my paper around the part of the pin that I'm going to be using to get my edge, and I just start working. Just plain and simple, just start rubbing it right into the area right there. Then once you have the general shape down, then you just start using your fingers. Just fold the paper over your finger and just start rubbing into it, allowing yourself to shape it a little bit as you go. Okay, as you can see, I've got this side about to where I want it. It'll need a little more buffing when I polish it out, but I don't want to work it too much since it's such a small piece. If you'll be real tempted to overwork this and get it and start losing shape and start losing metal, and you don't want to do that. As you can see, there's what it kind of looked like before with the little, like someone just did bam, bam with a Dremel, and this is a little more polished out. That's another thing I want to say. Never be tempted to just use a Dremel to round things like this out. You'll find yourself taking out too much steel, taking off too much work, and you can't put things back. Do it by hand, do it slowly, and don't make those mistakes. It's easier to take a little more off than it is to put anything back.